Super Mario 64, released in 1996 to critical acclaim as one of the first truly 3D platforming games. It revolutionized the Mario series and video games as a whole, and is widely loved for its 3D level design. The next 3D Mario game was Super Mario Sunshine, released for GameCube in 2002. Unlike 64, Sunshine was much more an incremental evolution on top of Mario 64, iterating on a successful formula rather than trying to set a brand new precedent. I'd like to analyze the incremental differences between the two games' level design, focusing specifically on high-level breakdowns of the first level of each game, Bob-omb Battlefield and Bianco Hills. We'll look at subtle differences in level traversal and star locations to tease out a difference between the game's design philosophies, which I analogize to the difference between the playgrounds of Mario 64 and the stories of Mario Sunshine. Let's start by looking at Bob-omb Battlefield and Mario 64. In order to analyze from a high level, it will help to look at the level's design in abstract. We can split the level up into different zones and look at what path the player learns to follow between zones and through them. I see Bob-omb Battlefield as split into 5 zones: the starting area, including the lower dirt area on the left, the first upper grass area, including the chain shop enclosure, the second upper grass area with the red coin star location, the mountain, and finally the floating island. Moving between zones breaks down into a single core path with a couple side paths. The core path begins in Zone 1, follows the ramp and path past Zone 2, over the bridge towards Zone 3, and then crosses over to climb the mountain in Zone 4. The side paths include an unlockable door that connects Zone 3 back to Zone 1, a slope from Zone 4 back to Zone 1, and 3 cannons across the map that allow access to Zone 5. With this breakdown in hand, let's see how the game teaches you to move through the zones in the first 4 missions of the game. In Big Bob-omb on the Summit, you follow exactly the core path of the level, with no benefit for exploring any of the side paths or areas. Foot Race with Koopa the Quick again follows this core path, adding a time pressure that encourages players to ignore side areas. Shoot to the Island in the Sky finally shows off more of the level, providing access to the cannons in side areas and teaching access to the floating island. Find the 8 red coins is the first level that asks for any real exploration. The player has already gone past at least 5 of the red coins already, but they at least ask for mild deviations from the core path. The remaining 3 show off areas of the map that might have been missed the first time through, rounding out understanding of the map and its paths. Now, obviously any level in any 3D game is going to have paths that you repeatedly traverse, but something stands out here. The core path appears prioritized above any other areas of the level, and the orders of the stars cement this intentionality. The first 2 stars emphasize nothing but the main path to the top of the mountain. The next one tutorializes access to Zone 5, and it isn't until the 4th mission that the game encourages players to explore the side areas of Zones 2 and 3 and discover connections between zones that they might have missed before. By the end of it, the level has intentionally taught the player a certain way of moving through the level. You should stick to the core path whenever possible, but if you need to quickly get from A to B, there might be a faster option if you look. This abstraction of level traversal is by no means unique to Bob-omb Battlefield, and in fact the paradigm is all over Super Mario 64 levels. As just a few examples, Womp's Fortress has a specific path to climb to the top, a process that you have to repeat twice early on. Shifting Sandland provides a circular path around the outside to reach the pyramid entrance, and Wet Dry World requires very specific pathing to incrementally raise the water levels. It's because of this that I think of Mario 64 levels as playgrounds. Each one splits into a few memorable zones, and the levels broadcast designed paths that connect between them. Rather than exploring an open space, playing a Mario 64 level feels like running across a playground or jungle gym. First, you take the rope ladder up, then swing across the monkey bars, climb up the stairs, and finally take the big slide down to reach the star. In contrast, the first level of Mario Sunshine plays very differently. Rather than thinking of Sunshine's levels as playgrounds, I see them as full stories that take you on a tour of a world. To uncover this fundamental difference in presentation from Bob-omb Battlefield, we will again look at the level zones and then trace Mario's path through them. Bianco Hills splits easily into 4 zones, with 2 side areas that don't fit anywhere else. The starting area and path towards the river, the village area, the trees and path on the other side of the wall, the windmill, and 2 side areas, the platforms above the village and the platforms on the lake. But unlike how Bob-omb Battlefield defines a core path through its zones and sticks to that path over and over, Bianco Hills uses its zones in a unique way to tell a story. Let's look at the episodes. The first episode, Road to the Big Windmill, actually plays out pretty similarly to Big Bob-omb on the Summit from Mario 64. A possible core path appears right out of the gate. You follow the path towards the village, hug the wall to the right, ride over the water wheel, and run through the trees to reach the boss. After you beat the boss and return for episode 2, it seems like the similarities to 64 are going to continue. Here, you have to reach the windmill once again and fight another boss, Petey Piranha, but something is different this time around. Unlike Racing Koopa the Quick, most players will not take the same path they did the first time. A floodgate has opened in the village walls, creating a shortcut that skips the water wheel from before. On top of that, the traversal in this level builds off of the narrative of the previous. After defeating the first boss, a ramp rose up, connecting the path up to the windmill. Now we can continue the path that was started in the previous level, climbing to the top of the windmill and reaching the second boss fight. Although it seems subtle, the different pathing between the first and second episodes goes a long way to differentiate Bianco Hills from the dynamics we saw in Bob-omb Battlefield. First, the shortcut on the way into Zone 3 is crucial to disrupt a pattern from being built when heading towards the windmill. Second, the ramp rising up at the end of the first episode makes the second one read as the continuation of a single journey, the road to the big windmill, rather than a single journey repeated twice. Just like in Mario 64, the fourth episode of Bianco Hills is a red coin star. However, the impact of the coin locations on the level's affect couldn't be more different. In Mario 64, the star served to reinforce the same movement paths that had been taught already, only adding marginal exploration to new areas or new methods of traversal. However, in Sunshine, the red coins serve as an introduction to a previously unexplored area, the village that Mario has run past before but never had a need to explore further. No coins will be found on the now familiar paths near the lake and windmill, but instead must be discovered in a new area. Unlike Mario 64's red coins, they are used here to further disrupt previous patterns of moving through the level and highlight an area that was previously passed over. Taken as a whole, the episodes of Bianco Hills can be seen as telling a story within the level, not just achieving arbitrary objectives across a playground. You take down 2 bosses just on the way to the windmill, then you explore the village you've been protecting from those bosses. In the 5th episode, you have to defend the village when Petey Piranha comes back for a rematch, and finally you can conclude the level's story by taking down Shadow Mario in the 7th episode. Another way of looking at the same difference is apparent when we look at star accessibility. In other words, when you enter the level to play a certain star, what other stars are still also available to collect? This chart shows the star accessibility matrix for the 2 levels, and each is indicative of patterns in their respective games. Most stars in most Mario 64 levels are available no matter which mission you select, while most of the time in Sunshine, it's only possible to complete the star specific to the episode you chose. Sunshine forces you to experience the stories that the worlds have to tell in the specific order that they're meant to be played. There's no skipping around or taking the rope swing from one side of the playground to the other. You get to experience the levels and their stories in a carefully crafted order, and the game's narrative is that much stronger for it. It would be easy to stop here. We could just say that Sunshine strictly improved on Mario 64. It uses more narratively cohesive levels to tell a stronger story, and it's the superior game for it. But I don't think it's all that clear-cut. Sure, Sunshine has some more intentional design behind its levels, and it likely works better as an experience for first-time players. But more than 20 years after the release of these games, focusing only on the first-time players doesn't make sense. Instead, we can also look to the most devoted players of these games, speedrunners. Speedrunners have taken both of these games to their extremes, and it almost goes without saying which game has stood the test of time better. Although a level as a story makes a really compelling experience once, it doesn't quite hold the same charm the 5th, or 50th, or 50,000th time. The level as a playground, however, lends itself naturally to speedrunning in a way that Sunshine just doesn't quite do. The core paths of the level lend themselves to optimization, and the ability to obtain stars out of order gives much more freedom to the dedicated player than a linear story progression can. Most Mario 64 speedruns collect either 16 or 70 of the 120 stars in the game, and levels as playgrounds lend themselves both to the optimization and on-the-fly spontaneous decision-making that speedrunning requires. On the other hand, Sunshine speedruns require beating 7 episodes in every single level just to reach the final boss, with very little freedom in the order that shines can be collected. There's a reason that Mario 64 has more than 3 times as many submitted leaderboard speedruns as Sunshine. Super Mario Sunshine serves as a meaningful iteration over the genre-defining Mario 64. It transforms levels from simple playgrounds to develop stories, and its contributions to the 3D Mario series are certainly echoed in Galaxy and Odyssey. But it's important to understand the appeal of these different design philosophies, and contrasting the games is an important reminder that when it comes to game design, there are no right answers, only decisions you have to make.